not, then I'll leave. I thought it was posted as an open public meeting. I'm sorry. Oh, well then I'm here for the planning
I thought you
commission.
were coming here for an item.
No, I just thought I'd come check it out. I saw it was an open meeting.
It's good to see how it goes and first started as a Zoom.
Said,
If you would have given me some time, I think this would go pretty quick, in my opinion. We'll see. And don't we have the only item? Yeah, this is the only item here. And if you could give me a little time so we can catch up maybe after this meeting. You don't want to? That's okay.
sure, I've got all the
I think
time.
it'll, I think it'll.
It's dark already, so. Nothing else to do, right?
This is the safest place to be after dark, right? We always wondered about this chamber. You know, one thing good about the Kansas City one is it's like an income room. You don't have any. And this chamber, we always, because I always sit this way forward and cannot see things behind me. We always wondered, okay, these are all glass. It's a safety thing, right? That's a very good question. Who's the second? I think John is. We have to pull the record out. Choose the chair. That we know. You do not have anybody to say that other. Okay. I think we should have a quorum now.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Welcome, everybody. Called the meeting on November 7th, 2024 to order at just after 6 o'clock. First order of business tonight is approval of the agenda from our previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Oh, I'm sorry. It's of tonight's meeting.
I move we approve agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Good deal. Okay, second item is approval of minutes from the October 3rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good deal. All right, comments from the public. Now invite members of the public to speak directly to the Planning Commission. If you'd like to speak, we've got a microphone up here. State your name and address and continue with your statement. Time limit of 5 minutes. Any takers? Alrighty. We'll move on to the first real item on our agenda for this evening. Number 5, PC 2024-1101, Martin Marietta Conditional Use Permit. Ms. Wood. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and Council. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I was still leaving on yesterday. In front of you is a request for a renewal of a conditional use permit in order for Martin Marietta to continue their operation as stone yard at the railroad site. The current applicant on file is Martin Marietta, Kansas City, LLC. The property owner is the Burlington North and Santa Fe Railroad. The applicant leases a large portion of the rail site to conduct the piling and the crushing and operating and logistic of the stone yard. This particular application was first approved by Planning Commission and City Council in 2010, and then was renewed in 2015 and 2020. So now this is another renewal has been requested by the applicant for another 5 years. The standard conditions has been placed on the staff report. There are a total 10 different conditions over there, with number 4 item regarding the solid fencing requirement has been requested by the applicant to be revised, that this will be deferred to the next renewal time. There are practical issues over there for fencing along the rail yard. There are also concerns about the particular value for this type of fence, since there are already established uses over there. The hotel has been there for a while, and there are also Aura Apartments. They just established their own fence. And then really there is an undeveloped site, which was formerly discussed to be a grocery store, but yet hasn't been established. So the applicant requested to postpone this requirement and to be discussed at the next renewal time. The applicant does have a slide to actually a PowerPoint to go through with any further questions you might have, if you would allow him to present to you.
Yeah, do we want to wait for questions until after the presentation and then circle back? Good deal. Thank you.
That's all right. I might pull this back a little bit so I can follow along with our own slideshow presentation. Can you hear me? There, too loud. Well, Chairperson and members of the Planning Commission, my name's John Mullane with Rouse Fretz White Goss Law Firm, 4510 Bellevue, Kansas City, Missouri. I'm here on behalf of Martin Marietta, Kansas City. And with me tonight, behind me, as you can see, are Martine Bernard and Matt Rosenthal. And as was just presented to you, we're here before you tonight for the third renewal of a conditional use permit for Martin Marietta. Back in 2010, Martin Marietta leased about 13 acres of the interior of the BNSF rail yard in North Kansas City and obtained the first conditional use permit to unload, store, reload, and ship hard rock aggregate. Now, Martin Marietta, very generally, and they can speak a bit more technically about this, is in the business of supplying aggregates and heavy building materials. And one of the driving forces for demand in the greater Kansas City metro area are the roadway specifications, which necessitate shipments of hard rock aggregate. And the hard rock aggregate is not locally available, so it's shipped in by rail. So, way back 15 years or so ago, 2010, I don't like to say is about 15 years ago, it feels like that was maybe 2 or 3, Martin Marietta was looking for an ideal location to serve the demand I was just talking about. The location needed industrial zoning, rail access, space to stockpile, interstate highway access, being close to customers, and an economically feasible location. And obviously, since this is our third renewal, the property that was identified to meet those requirements is the BNS rail yard, which is shown here in this aerial. And if you can look at it, I think most of you are probably familiar with the area, so you understand generally where it is, but the BNS rail yard runs diagonally from southwest to northeast in the middle of the slide. 210 highway runs east to west on the north, and I-29, I-35 runs generally north-south on the west side of the site. Now, this location is picked for the reasons I identified earlier, but it's zoned M2 General Industrial. There's a number of permitted uses in M2, such as heavy manufacturing, outdoor storage, and junkyard. This location is used as a rail yard. M2 also allows, via conditional use permit, natural resource processing and extraction, which is why we're here. More specifically, the application itself is for the rescreening, offloading, storing, and reloading of aggregate. Now, Martin Marietta does this operation all over the country, and I'm just kind of walk you through kind of what it looks like so you can understand what it is when I'm saying storage and offloading. But this is generally how the process works. You can see here a track hoe mounting an open-top rail car which hauls in the rock aggregate. Track hoe gets on top of the rail car to unload the aggregate. And here's offloading from an open-top rail car to a truck for transportation to a stockpile. That's kind of what the stockpiles would look like at this specific site, looking northeast. And here's the entrance looking south from 16th. And I identified it there, but there's the truck scale. And just to the left of it on the photograph, you can see the little office buildings that are utilized. Kind of one of the things we were just talking about is the M2 zoning district generally requires a solid screen fence of 6 feet in height. And this condition has historically been deferred due to the lease area being a little unique in that it's between 2 rail lines. So it would be very hard to put a fence screen up on the lease area, which I'm about to show you on the next few slides. But last week, Ms. Wood brought up the issue of the fence requirement since now there's structures in the area that have been built up over the last few years that weren't there historically. And BNSF has already fenced a portion of the exterior, and the apartments have added some of their own fencing, and there is now an area in front of the hotel with no fence, which was just talked about. And that's where, as reflected in the report, we discussed with staff about a fence. And on our end, when we met with Ms. Wood on Friday, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves because we've worked with the city for a while and we want to be good tenants here in town since we've been here for 15 years. So we met with Ms. Wood, we talked, and then we reviewed the draft staff report, and we had discussion about what it might actually look like for us to try and obtain the exterior portion outside of the tracks, and for a variety of reasons, which I'm about to go through. We informed Ms. Wood, and we're now asking you for a deferral of any interior fence screen requirements and certainly asking you to not have a condition to go out and lease this exterior portion. But here on the screen is the actual aerial of the site, and it's a bit hard to see because there's a lot, it's very high up aerial. Site looks pretty small, even though it's not. But the lease area is highlighted in purple. And there's a rail line to both the north and also to the south of the rail line, and the aggregate stockpiled in the middle. This photo shows the actual lease area, and this next one might be a little bit more clear. And here it is shown with the tracks highlighted in red, and the lease area is actually the cross lines. So, as has been the discussion since the initial issuance of the conditional use permit, trying to add an interior screening fence in the lease area is pretty impractical because the use of Martin Marietta is to load and unload the train cars, as I showed you before, with the aggregate, which requires access to the trains themselves. So a screen just does not really work. And moreover, practically, then an interior fence on the tracks does not really benefit any of these neighboring properties in terms of screening any sorts of the operations because there's still an exterior train that's coming through and it's still a fairly large rail yard site. It's just more of the same view. And you can kind of see here right here on the right of the photo, that's the area that was initially proposed with staff. I mean, that's the front of the hotel area. There's just another view of the apartments and the grade change and how, I mean, just the elevation they've got, they can clearly see clear across the entirety of the rail yard. And there it is, the hotel. And another side view of the proposed fence location. And you can see there the tracks, and on the other side is the lease area. And this exterior portion is still BNSF property.
Do you know how tall that chain link fence is right there? Is that 6 foot?
6 foot.
Okay, thanks.
And so that area is BNSF property on the tracks and the exterior, and then it turns into hotel property. And like I said, of the proposed fence locations, that is the one that would make the most sense. But having discussed the issue, it would be very difficult for Martin Marietta to try and go out and actually lease this area from BNSF, just given a lot of the nature of the business operations there. Martin Marietta is only one user of the rail yard. Sorting out access to that would be very difficult because it's something of an island. I mean, there's users on this side, the other side, so trying to get from the interior, sorting out easement access out there would be pretty difficult. And working with the rail yard is inherently difficult. Just there's a lot of specific requirements and loopholes to jump through, insurance requirements, questions of liability for the exterior, and actually securing the interior of the property, which really the ultimate control of the exterior is BNSF. But as I said, exterior, a problem to acquire the lease, so we'd certainly ask you not to include that as a condition that we go out and try and acquire it. And then on the interior, it's extremely impractical just given the nature of the use and operation that Martin Marietta conducts. And it was raised earlier, one of the points is that BNSF, even when Martin Marietta is not using the train cars to load and unload, BNSF can go in there and do the same. So if Martin Marietta's put up any sort of interior screening, we'd have to coordinate with them as well, and it just really extremely difficult. So ultimately, I've walked you through it, probably circled back a lot on the same points, but we'd be asking for a deferral of any screening requirement again for another 5 years till we come back. And we'd ask that you recommend approval of the conditional use permit with that same deferral of the condition. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and we're here if you've got any specific questions.
Thank you for the slides, and the visuals are very helpful. I was trying to pull up Google Maps street views on my phone, and these pictures are useful to see. So Shu, I guess quickly for you, it sounds like the intent is if there's a use butted up to an industrial use, we want to kind of shield them off. Given the pictures, it doesn't seem like a 6 foot fence is going to do anything like that. I appreciate the elevation difference, and it would be impractical for the train car movements and the movements of the scooper excavator type piece. Why is this not something that's been required of the railroad before? Do we know?
This requirement is not against the railroad's use. This is a requirement for this particular industrial use proposed by Marietta Stone Yard.
So it's tied to the use,
It's
not
tied
the
to-
zoning district?
No, it's tied to the zoning district, the M2, and particular for industrial use, because railroad yard are railroad yard, they're their own category,
Okay.
their own use, and they have all the rights to do their own use, so we are not able to governing over it.
So they don't, like, a railroad does not require the fence?
No.
Okay. Interesting. Then I see no reason to require it for this.
We also debate about if we were to require the fence, what situation, why is there such a code requirement per zoning? It is really a 6 solid foot fence that's no taller, a foot taller than me, but visually, but visually, really, from distance that's over 20, 30 feet, it doesn't do much of a help. So this is merely aesthetic purposes. It's not going to block any sound, any vibration, noise. And Marietta has so far been a decent neighbor.
Yeah.
I've only received 2 complaints in the past 3 years since I've been here.
About the rock
about
Specifically?
the rock.
Okay.
About the operating particularly. One is really on a very high wind day, so the dust kind of flies all over. And one is really the operating schedule about watering down. So if you read the staff report, there is a condition that they're supposed to water those rock down, so there's a control over the dust. So really, that is more of an aesthetic purpose, if you're asking me for this particular requirement there. And there is practical difficulty. I have visited the site with the applicant, and thank you for the tour. I have to say, yes, in the interior side, which is right abutting where the rock pile is, in between the railroad track and the aggregates, it's almost impossible for you to establish fence over there.
Yep.
And they'll have to load and unload aggregates from the carts. So that is a practical difficulty. And then the exterior side, that's where I have proposed, I said you guys could continue this particular fence you see on the chain link all the way down. So this way there is a fencing for this particular area that abuts the hotel. But also, when you're asking what does that fence really do over there, probably not much. So since there is still a large piece of land that the city controls that we have not established a user, that's where I agreed with the applicant's proposal that we can defer this particular requirement to the next renewal time and see how the use gets established in the future.
Yeah, looking top down, there's a parcel there that may become a bar or a grill, some sort of outdoor activity spot, fingers crossed, and at that point, it might make more sense to have some segment of fence to shield it off, but at this point, to me, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Could we go back just a photo or two? The photos are really helpful. Yeah, right. Yeah, this is the apartments, right? Okay. I just wanted to kind of get perspective there.
Could you, sorry to make you jump around, could you go one more forward? Yeah, this one's good. So this is, for my eyes, this is a public safety concern. It's less about noise and other effects from being in very close proximity to a railroad. It's more about blocking it off from pedestrian access, people that aren't supposed to be getting in there. But at the same time, I guess my question is, for the existing fence that is there, that doesn't block off this portion of the hotel access, where did those fences come from? Who put those in?
Those fences are owned and established by the private property owner, not the rail yard.
So the apartments put in the fencing?
Yes.
Gotcha, okay. But the hotels chose not to?
That I could not answer because it was established before.
I
And
see.
I might reach out to the hotel and ask for their intention there, see if there is any intention for establishing on their site. As you can see, there actually are some utility boxes
Yeah.
back to where, between, there are utility boxes over there on the other side of the open ditch before you hit the track. And the area between the utility and the track, they're very minimum over there. So if you were asking me, I think it actually makes more sense for each individual owner to kind of fence their own area. I don't know why the hotel did not. It's not a requirement.
Yeah.
They're not required to fence it. And normally, railroad would have a safety concern and would like to fence it off. And at this point, without talking to them, I also don't know why they chose not to fence it.
Okay.
But we can reach out and try to see if there's any intention for anybody wanting to fence it, just for the safety concerns that you raised up.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see, aside from kind of inconveniently being sandwiched in between two railroad tracks, which is very convenient for business but weird for land use, I don't see how this ought to be Martin Marietta's concern. I think this ought to require a more cohesive strategy that either we take on with BNSF or the hotel or the individual property owners as things get developed over there. Yeah, that's where I'm at on it.
So you're only leasing the island, right? The island in between the tracks.
The interior, yeah. And
So
then
that would be, so that's theoretically, your responsibility would be to fence inside the tracks,
right.
not this area that we're looking at.
Hence the practical point of
So-
we'd be screening that. And I kind of raised the point earlier that even regardless of that, BNSF still, when Martin Marietta's not using it, can utilize that track to load and unload. So it's kind of unclear how an interior fence from Martin Marietta would truly
Accomplish much.
work. You're right.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just,
Well, my only question for this is, if we're deferring it again, are we having this conversation again?
Yep.
And then that just continues and nothing can be changed?
Well, there might be future land use, like, I want to say
Smith.
Councilmember, like Commissioner Smith mentioned earlier, that there might be other use to be established since there are still vacant lots.
Yeah, it's worth deferring.
It would
So
be a
what do we need?
very rare event for BNSF to vacate railway, but in the event that in 5 years that's something that happens, we might.
I
wanna
wouldn't
revisit.
expect that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what sort of motion are we looking at here?
You could make a motion to approve it with conditions stated in staff report, that with one amendment to condition number 4, as we discussed, to change that requirement to that the solid fence 6-foot solid fence screening to be requirement to be deferred to the next renewal for further evaluation. You can just state like that.
Okay, so I would move that we recommend approval of the conditional use permit to the city council with the following conditions listed by staff. However, the solid screen fence would be deferred to the next renewal.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we need to take roll for this?
Nope.
Yes?
No, yes. All right,
Perhaps. We're going to do it anyways.
formalize it.
Commissioner Thornburg.
Here?
Uh,
Say
yes,
here?
yeah.
Yes?
Aye. Aye.
Or no.
Commissioner Talbot.
aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Spencer.
Aye.
Commissioner Steele, aye. Absent Commissioner DeLong, Commissioner Tull. I believe that passes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next item on the list, comments from staff.
I have one little comment, not really a comment, that we do know there will be another application, ideally to be placed on the December docket. I want to make sure that we have a quorum for it. If not, I would like to inform the applicant as soon as possible. So I know it's a little early still, but it's around holiday time, so I want to make sure we get some feedback. I'll have Megan send out an email to remind everybody about the date time. If you could not make it, please respond to her, so this way we can get a head count.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Comments from commissioners.
One from me. So council approved the updated conditional use permit stuff yesterday. Would that impact the next renewal of this?
That was a short-term conditional
That's
use
right.
permit, so it has not I know the name is really confusing,
All
but
right.
that is really for temporary uses.
Okay, sounds good. I'll start down that track next, sending all this to staff too. Eventually, we'll offload everything to you. That's all.
Further comment?
Move to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Oh.
John, thank you for coming and making the presentation. Nice working with you.
Yeah, and so when will this
We'll go to city council hopefully, we usually meet first and third Tuesday, so the next one is, I have to look at the calendar, the third Tuesday. So the third Tuesday.